Again, we have a few announcements. Mary Willits, who is the teacher in charge of the 1-hour credit, has asked me to inform you people who are going to turn in an evaluation, which is one of the requirements for the 1-hour credit plus your $20 and filling out the correct form. If you have not filled out your form yet for the college, we have some on the corner of the desk next to the wall. And Mary wants your evaluation of the conference before you leave today. She said it could be in rough draft, so that's an out for you. But be sure to sign your name to your work and turn it into Mary Willits. And I think you know who Mary Willits is, right here at the corner. Okay. I would like to go on record of praising the assistant project director of this conference, who is Jim Hornaday. And I think the biggest job, well, without a doubt, the biggest job that he did, he was the one that was on top of this book. Yesterday I praised the students for having it printed. Today I'd like to praise Jim Hornaday that saw it through. He organized it, he worked it out, he got the experienced chairman to get their work in, and he saw that it was printed. So, Jim Hornaday, you did a fine job. We have the Russian experience this morning. Sister Victoria of the St. Herman's Pastoral School is in charge of the Russian experience, and if you haven't met Sister Victoria, you've missed something, I feel anyway. I felt that when the St. Herman's Pastoral School moved from Wildwood or Kenai to Kodiak, I thought, oh no, I haven't gotten all the information out of Sister Victoria that I wanted. Now she's going to Kodiak. I'll never be able to converse with her again. But she's back for this conference, and I always enjoy tapping any information I can receive from you, Sister Victoria. So now, Sister Victoria, you have the show. Yes?
Alex had his hand up.
Sorry, Alex, you're out of luck. You came in late. Yes, there are more. Right at the end of the coffee break or so, well, again, ask those people who, well, we'll do it right now. Yeah, anyone else who did not receive a book? Oh, there's 2 more. You're certainly welcome. I was really kidding you. That's a very nice souvenir to take back. Sister Victoria.
Well, after all that's been said about our fine resource booklet, I hate to be the one to point out the mistake. But that's where I think I'll begin by just mentioning to you that there are a couple of pages out of order in this article on the Russian experience. Just so that as you read it, you don't think that something's missing, and it's not missing, it's just in reverse order. On page 67, when you get to the bottom of page 67, go to page 70 for the continuation. And when you get to the bottom of page 70, revert back to page 68. And that way you'll have the proper sequence of pages. I'm sorry. I'd like to begin by saying something that a teacher of mine told me never to say at the beginning of a presentation or talk. I want to begin by somewhat disqualifying myself as an authority on the Russian experience, because I know that there are many of you present here in the audience today who have been delving into the Russian period of history, and especially here on the Kenai Peninsula, far longer than I have. And I know that there are many of you here who are in a position to have information that I couldn't possibly have had to draw on in preparing my paper for today. So I hope that a significant part of our morning will be devoted to real give and take between all of the participants here, all of you who have something special to offer concerning your knowledge of the Russian period of Alaskan history here on the Kenai Peninsula. I was asked to prepare this presentation probably because Jim Hornaday knew that the archives at St. Herman's Pastoral School had some information on the period that by and large is unused. I don't want to say unknown, because this material has been available for some time, but I don't know, no one has spoken about it, no one has publicized it, and therefore few people have touched it. I'm referring, first of all, to the missionary diaries or missionary journals. Every missionary who came to Alaska, in fact, every missionary anywhere in the Russian Orthodox Church, was always obliged to keep a kind of daily record. It wasn't a diary in the sense of a personal diary, but it was a daily record of his activities with any important information on the village he was visiting, any important information on particular difficulties his people were having. And therefore, these diaries are a prime source of information, not only for the Kenai Peninsula, but for every place where the Russian Orthodox Church extended its mission. Not all the diaries are available today. I'm sure some of them have perished, but on the other hand, many of them have been preserved. One good place to find many diaries is the Library of Congress. Another good place to find many diaries is St. Herman's Pastoral School. I should add that these diaries are available for your use. Some of the diaries that are at the Library of Congress have been partially translated. Some of them are available on microfilm. Others are not available so easily. One really has to go there to the Library of Congress in order to use this collection, which is largely uncatalogued. The diaries in our possession at St. Herman's Pastoral School are presently being microfilmed by the State Museum, and they will be available for your use. Unhappily, they are not translated. They're being microfilmed in the original. But besides the diaries, there's one other important source that I relied on heavily for preparing this paper, and that is a periodical called the Russian Orthodox American Messenger. That periodical was published here in North America, and it began publication in 1896 and continued publication steadily into 1917. There was a little break there, and then it began to be published again, but in this second series there isn't so much information that deals specifically with Alaska. It's this first series from 1896 to 1917 that's of first interest to us. And there you'll find endless articles on the churches in Alaska, both in English and in Russian. I was speaking last night very briefly with a school teacher who's here from Tyonek, telling him that if he were interested, for example, in doing something on the village of Tyonek, he'll find article after article, which, if not specifically dealing with Tyonek, mentions Tyonek, has Tyonek as a certain part of report and so forth. And the same is true for those of you who are from the Milchik, from, I was going to say from Klutna and Knik, of course the other villages that the missionary priests visited or have since been abandoned. I'm speaking of the Susitna River villages, Katmai, and so on. But for anyone who wants to research this period, this is the best source. And as I say, much of it is in English. Well, having said that much, let's get down to the real business of this conference. As you all know, during the Russian period of Alaskan history, there were really just two institutions which shaped all of that history. I'm speaking of the Russian American Company and the church. My presentation deals primarily with the life of the church because the source material I've mentioned, of course, deals primarily with the church. Although there's also very important information on the company to be found in this material, especially as regards the clashes that occurred between the company and the church when the missionaries would defend the rights of the natives against exploitation by company officials. But I'm very, very fortunate to have today as a consultant here on the Russian period Inez Hazy, who has as her specialty the Russian American Company. So she'll be able to provide a certain balance to this presentation. Where I will dwell on the life of the church, she'll be able to give you information on the company. What I propose to do this morning is to talk to you about some of the less talked about, although I don't want to say unknown, material concerning the period, and then spend the time after the coffee break in as much discussion as possible. I'd like to start with some generalities first, not exactly what was going on here in Kenai, but background to the mission in Kenai and throughout Alaska. Often, I think, when we remember the early beginnings of the Russian period, we think of it as an isolated phenomenon, as a colony or as a mission, very particular and not connected too much to what may have gone on earlier in Russia. But when those missionaries who came from Russian Finland in 1794 made that long, it took a year, a long trek across Siberia to get here to Kodiak and to Alaska, they were following in the footsteps of their predecessors over several hundred years, if not 1,000 years. Russia, or perhaps to be more accurate, I should say the Slavs, had received Christianity 1,000 years before they came. And that original mission from Byzantium, from Constantinople, from the Greeks, to the Slavs, established the pattern of all future Orthodox mission. That first mission, the names associated with it are St. Cyril and Methodius, who went actually to what is today the area of Czechoslovakia. That mission presents us with a paradigm that has always been followed. I don't want to go into that in great detail here, but let me just outline it for you. These two monks were sent from the city of Constantinople to the Slav tribes in, actually it was Moravia in those days. There they began their work by inventing an alphabet for the Slavs, who had a spoken but not a written language. And once they had provided a writing system, they proceeded to translate the gospel and church services into the Slav language. Then they proceeded to preach to the people in their own language. to train the native Slav people to become leaders in their own church, and eventually the whole life of the church was placed in the hands of Slav people themselves. When a mission was matured, this was the criterion, that it would be able to train its own people, and that its own people would provide the leadership for the local church. This was the pattern that occurred later in Kievan, Russia, and at last all across Siberia, as tribe after tribe after tribe was converted to Christianity. The step that brought the missionaries to Alaska was simply the next step in this long process covering thousands of miles and hundreds of years. And everything would have progressed in much the same way in Alaska if, first of all, the sale of Alaska, and more importantly, the Russian Revolution, had not interfered with the completion of this work. Alaska, to date, has not achieved this kind of self-governing or leadership that the missions in Siberia had already achieved. What was the effect of the sale of Alaska? Well, a very direct effect was the removal of the ecclesiastical school in Sitka, which was already trying to train local clergymen. It was removed back to Siberia. Also, the headquarters, the diocesan see, which was Sitka, was moved back to Siberia. The bishop at that time was the famous Bishop Innocent Veniaminov. During all of that time, from 1867 on to the Russian Revolution, the church in Alaska continued to be supported by the church in Russia. Priests came, students were often taken back to Irkutsk for training. Others were sent to another school, which was developed in San Francisco. And the life of the church was extremely vigorous. Although this was after the sale of Alaska, it was the time when the mission really got underway in Southeast Alaska, for example. But all of this came to a terrific halt in 1917, when all funds were cut off, when the whole church in North America was sort of left on its own. That was the time when the last church school in Alaska was closed. Prior to that time, there was a very large educational system. And it's worth pointing out that during this period, between 1867 and 1917, there was lots more educational work being done by the Russian Orthodox Church in Alaska than by the American government. That was true here in Kenai, where the Russian school for many, many years was the only school. But I wanted to say those things to give you some background, to show you that what happened in Kenai was pretty much of a pattern with what happened in other places where there was Orthodox missionary effort. But now I think it's time to start right in on Kenai. You know, of course, that the peninsula here was the first place to be settled on the mainland by the Russians. The Russians came up the chain, of course. They were on Alaska. Ben Shelikoff established his colony at Kodiak. But it was just 1 year after the establishment of Kodiak that the first settlement on the peninsula was established, and that was Alexandrovsk, or English Bay as it's known today, Fort St. Alexander. The year was 1785. Just a year later, the rival company of Lebedev-Lastочкин established a settlement at Fort St. George. This is present-day Kisilov. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with that early history of the clash between the two companies. I've outlined it in the paper that's in the resource booklet, and I don't think it's worthwhile to repeat it here because you can all read it. In any case, it was the same company of Lebedev-Lastочкин which some time later sent another group of men to establish a new colony, a new settlement. And in 1791, under the leadership of a man whose name was Konovalov, 62 men arrived here at Fort St. Nicholas, Nikolaevsk, and established what has become Kenai. Now, the missionaries had not yet arrived. They arrived 3 years later, in 1794. I'm speaking of that first band of missionaries who came from Russian Finland, from Valam Monastery, and actually there were two monasteries. The other one was called Konevitsa. They arrived 10 men strong in Kodiak, and from there branched out to cover many different areas in Alaska. St. Herman of Alaska wanted very much to come here to Kenai as a missionary. It's very interesting to read his letters, which are available. His letters back home to his abbot at Valam Monastery, in which he describes the other monks, what they're doing, how they're fitting in, his own hopes for the future, and so on. He, however, did not make that journey, and as you heard yesterday, it was his companion monk, Father Juvenali, who made that trip in 1795. Starting out in the spring, he went first to Hinchinbrook Island, to Nuchek, traveled through Prince William Sound, baptizing native people. He came here to Kenai and wintered, spending most of his time at Skituk village, the native village that was 2 miles from the fort, and then crossed Cook Inlet to the Alaska Peninsula, where he met his death at the hands of natives. I'm not going to say more about that now, but perhaps in the question and answer session we can go more deeply into that if that's where your interest lies. During the subsequent years, until a mission was established right here, there were occasional visits from the Kodiak priest. And indeed, Kenai was considered to be part of the Kodiak parish. It was one of the stops for the Kodiak missionary, if you like. This wasn't a very satisfactory arrangement because, well, I don't have to tell you how far Kodiak is and how extra far it is when you don't have an airplane available. But In any case, during all this time, there were frequent visits from the Kodiak priest, and also native people from this area would travel down to Kodiak when they wanted the services of a priest. Finally, in the late 1830s, Bishop Innocent Veniaminoff, at that time still priest John Veniaminoff, made a report in which he recommended that Kenai be established as a mission in its own right with a resident missionary here. Just a couple of years later, as bishop, he was able to carry out his own recommendation. And his choice first fell on someone else who was to become very, very famous in the Alaskan mission. I'm speaking of priest Jacob Nitzvetov. I don't know, again, why he has been so sorely neglected by Alaskan historians. He's a monumental figure and tremendously interesting because he was from Attu. He was a Creole born on Attu, of a Russian father and an Aleut mother. He went back to Irkutsk to study and was then assigned as the priest for the whole, I don't want to say southern half, but I want to say western half of the Aleutian chain. He was there while John Veniaminoff was taking care of the rest of the chain from Unalaska on up. Now he was called to Sitka by Bishop Innocent and was told that he would be assigned as the first resident missionary at Fort St. Nicholas, or Kenai. At the last minute, it didn't work out. I understand that the problem was weather, and he wasn't able to get here when he expected. And waiting at Sitka, Bishop Innocent sent him instead to the Yukon River. It's an interesting episode in history to find that the first and the greatest missionary of all of that Eskimo country was in fact an Aleut Creole. He served there for the rest of his life, and again, his diaries are available at our school. Here in Kenai, then, someone else was sent, and that someone else was Igumen Nikolai, or Abbot Nicholas. He came here in 1844. There already was a chapel that had been built by the company, but it was Abbot Nicholas who really made a church out of the little building by adding an altar table, by adding an icon screen, and so on. And it was at that time that the church received its name of Dormition, or Holy Assumption Church. Abbot Nicholas remained here for, well, I don't know how many years, until 1867, when he died right here. He never had another church, another parish, I should say. His responsibilities extended far beyond Kenai, and this again was the pattern for all the missionaries who were here. They served, I don't see that map here anymore, but they served an area extending from Eklutna and Knik in the north, down Cook Inlet, the villages on both sides of the inlet, as well as churches in Prince William Sound. It was such a vast territory that the missionary priest was not able to visit every church, every village in the course of a year. He usually did the northern half of his parish one year and the southern half of his parish the next. Again, Abbot Nicholas' diaries are available. We've printed some of them in abbreviated form in this little periodical called Orthodox Alaska. This is a historical bi-monthly put out by the Russian Orthodox Church here in Alaska, which contains articles of that kind, reprints of missionary diaries, other articles concerning the beginning of the mission, as well as contemporary news of the diocese. Here, in this particular issue, Volume 4, Number 4, you have the journals of the Kenai missionary Abbot Nicholas from September 1858 to 1864. They're full of information concerning native customs, concerning the growth of the church, concerning relations with company officials. The whole story seems to be here. It was Abbot Nicholas who first started a school here in Kenai. It was called the Igumen School, and it seems to have been quite a success. It met in his own home, and he continued teaching that school until his death. At that time, the school was dropped for a while, but it was resumed later on. I have entered into my paper here what we know about the outline of Igumen Nikolai's life. There's much more to be gleaned from his diaries than is contained in the article. So I urge you to try to read these diaries because they are so fascinating. Igumen Nikolai is buried today under the little chapel which you see across the street from the church. And in fact, that little chapel is named for St. Nicholas and was built especially in his memory, in memory, that is, of Igumen Nikolai. After the death of Abbot Nicholas in 1867, the same year as the sale of Alaska, there was no priest assigned immediately to Kenai, and life was carried on, the church life was carried on by the song leader, whose name was Macarius Ivanov. I'm sure that the Ivanovs who live here in Kenai today are the descendants of song leader Makar. He is another very interesting figure and deserves to have his biography written. He was succeeded in 1881 by another priest whose name was Father Nikita. Father Nikita was also a monk priest. And I've been speculating that perhaps his inspiration to come to Alaska, to work here in the Alaskan mission, may have stemmed from some connection with St. Herman of Alaska. The reason for this speculation is that he comes from the same general area and would have known something about St. Herman back in Russia. Also, Father Nikita's diaries are available. I keep saying that again and again, hoping that I'll inspire you to read them. During the time that Father Nikita was the priest here, that church that had already been built by the company was remodeled. But all the same, before too long, it began to become quite dilapidated, and the church that you see there now is not the same one. The church that you see there now was built later in 1896. That makes it a very old building all the same, but it's not the original one. Father Nikita continued the kind of missionary work that his predecessor, Igumen Nikolai, had undertaken. His responsibilities were in much the same areas, although now the area of Prince William Sound had its own missionary priest, so that he was somewhat relieved. Still, when you read the accounts of going out in small skin boats across the inlet on these incredible journeys, when you read of the hardships encountered, of the many narrow escapes that were risked in order to bring the gospel all up and down Cook Inlet in those early days, one can only marvel at the fortitude of these missionaries who labored so long, so far away from home, so far away from everything that had been familiar to them. Father Nikita also continued with education, and he was the one who reestablished the school here in Kenai. I've included in my paper a description of a typical school day. Unfortunately, Father Nikita's health wasn't of the best, and he was obliged to retire. He retired, interestingly enough, to Spruce Island, the home of St. Herman, and there he met his death in a tragic night fire that the natives of Spruce Island still remember. The story goes that his little cottage was burned to the ground, but strangely enough, the trees, the spruce trees round about in the clearing, weren't touched by the blaze. Just a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit that site, and you can still see the charred remains of that building. They're still very much in evidence. Well, following the time when Father Nikita was the priest here, there were several successive clergymen who spent shorter periods of time here. I think that I won't go into the story of each one of them, but I would like to mention that it was during the pastorate of a priest by the name of Father Alexander Yarashevich, beginning in 1893, that on the one hand the new church was built, and on the other hand a very notorious affair for the Kenai people took place. I'm referring to the Ryan affair. The Ryan affair is probably one of the best examples of what life was like after the Russian sale of Alaska and before the reestablishment of American government here in Alaska. The story is repeated in 100 incidents all over Alaska, many of them documented in the Russian Orthodox American Messenger. But this one happened in Kenai, and I've written out the story for you here in the resource booklet. It begins on page 64. The year is already 1894, and I say that even at this late date, the United States government had set no one in authority to Kenai. The nearest justice of the peace was in Kodiak. On April 22nd, 1895, Ryan, who was the local storekeeper for the North American Commercial Company, forced several men away from their work of bringing in logs for the construction of the new church building, threatening to kill them. The men fled to the church where a service was in progress. Ryan followed them with cries and profanity and started to drive the people at worship out of the building. He was rushed and disarmed and removed from the church, shouting all the time that he would kill the church warden Ivan Ivanov if his weapons were not returned to him. The Kenai people already had reason to fear Ryan. After navigation, that page doesn't follow either, does it? After navigation had stopped, I should say, for the winter, where does it continue? Does anyone see? It doesn't. After navigation had stopped for the winter, and it was impossible for the local people to do much traveling, Ryan and his companions would often terrorize the local native people. He would go over to Skeetup village and shoot off pistols. He would break into their homes in the middle of the night. And he would often force the people, not caring if they were ill or if there were children in the house, to do whatever he would have them do. And there was no recourse. There was no government authority to do anything about this. The people of Kenai, together with their priest, wrote a petition to the nearest government authority, trying to have something done about Ryan. And the only result of their efforts was his removal from his post at the Russian American Company, at the North American Commercial Company. However, that didn't stop him, of course. He remained in the area, and just a few years later we find him coming to Kenai again and terrorizing the native people again. It must have been an incredibly difficult time for the local residents. And it was one that continued for a good many years. It continued, in fact, into the time when a new priest, Father John Bortnovsky, was assigned here. He was here from 1896 to 1908. And if you remember our little talk yesterday from Mary Nissen, she remembered this priest and had a few words to say about the activity during his pastorate. At this moment, I would like to mention that just down the inlet from Kenai, there was a village called Californsky Village. And it seems to have been established somewhat earlier. It was a very small village consisting of just 4 barabras. But it's mentioned in the missionary journals for the first time during the pastorate of Father John Bortnovsky. When I was last in Kenai, Peter Californsky, who was born at Californsky Village, took me down to see the old village site. There are no traces of building there anymore, but Peter remembered exactly where every family had lived and pointed them out. He pointed out various graves in the cemetery, including that of his own grandfather, and reported that he, with his own hands, had dismantled the church after the village had been abandoned. Dismantled the church that had been at Californsky Village, and told us that the boards from the structure had been lost in the inlet during a storm when they were being transported. I hope that this mention of Californsky Village will provide a little bit of introduction to the interesting things that Inez Hazy has to say about some possible origins of old Kenai families. And since it's already 10 o'clock, I think I will wind up this narrative and simply refer you to the written word which you have in your hands for the remainder of the story. There's not much here. I'm talking then about the pastorate of Father Paul Shador, which began in 1906 and lasted up until the 1940s. I understand that there are diaries from this period. However, they're not available to scholars. We'll have to wait for a future time when this important period can be studied, this period when Russian influence dwindled off and American influence became more and more pronounced. A very important period just because of all the change that was going on. But having said that much, I would like to give the podium to Inez Hazy and for her remarks on the company and Kalifornsky and so on.
I must establish the so what in the following discussion. The Russian advance southward was due primarily to the securement of Alaskan foodstuff for the Alaskan colonies, and without them, Russia might not have been able to continue her mission in Alaska. This morning, I should like to speak of something that is rather important and has continued to be somewhat of a mystery. And this is the participants in the establishment of Fort Ross in California. In general, the establishments of the Russian American companies throughout all of Alaska followed basically the same pattern. The Russian American company's domination of the coastal peoples of Alaska followed a pattern of other colonial powers of the time, exploiting the natives and spread disease from one island to the next. But by the time the Russians had reached California, however, they seem to have become milder in their politics. There is little mention in the records of atrocities, the spread of diseases, or any brutal exploitation of the California Indians. The population of Ross was not a set pattern of Russian, Aleut, or California Indian, but a conglomeration of peoples from all over Russia, Siberia, Kamchatka, and the islands of Alaska, and a mixture of these peoples. The Russians were a mixture of aristocrats, statesmen, merchants, tradesmen, and soldiers, cutthroats and murderers. They served as diplomats, merchants, carpenters, shipbuilders, sawyers, and agriculturalists. The Aleutians and the Indians were laborers, hunters, fishers, sowers of seed, herders, and harvesters. The Russians were officers, heads of hunting expeditions, and skilled laborers. With the exception of the officers, many of them were criminal class. Temptations were few and discipline strict. John Sutter wrote in his reminiscence that I wanted some of the Russians to remain with me as hired men, but the officers told me I could do nothing with them, that they could hardly manage them themselves, and that they were sure I could not be severe enough. I then embarked in a small boat via Golden Gate for Yarovina. The boat was manned by 4 powerful Russians. Rochev accompanied me. The tide was against us. The sea ran high, and we narrowly escaped drowning. I said to Rochev, Your tyranny over your men is so complete that they will carry you to destruction if you tell them to. Only the higher officials and employees live within the stockade. The rest live outside it. The officers seem to have been above average. They were hard-working, conscientious, and most of them knew little about ways of business. The eating habits of both the Russian officers and men were influenced by their New World environment. Although they did not eat breakfast, they made up for it during the rest of the day. Their principal food consisted of salted sea lion meat, dried and salted seagulls, seagull eggs, salmon, wild goat meat, mutton, vegetables, fruits, wheat, and rum. The aliens were more particular, neither beef eaters nor vegetarians. They adhered to a diet similar to that which they had in Alaska. The Indians ate almost everything they could find. In the early years, when Kuskoff was manager of Ross, the aliens did pretty much as they wanted after working hours. They were allowed to build their houses in any manner. Khrushchev didn't insist that they keep them in any regular town pattern, but let them build where they choose. In many cases, the aliens, contrary to their own custom, imitated the houses of their masters by making them of board redwood, but some built their old-fashioned earth huts. From the beginning, the aliens were allowed to fraternize with California Indian women. Only in 1818 do we have any indication of Creole or Aleut wives coming down to join their husbands. Chimkov, who was on board this particular ship, found upon arrival that his father was living with an Indian woman, but not married to her, because there was no priest in the settlement to form the marriage. Ross seemed to have been without priest much of the time. Then Minov, just 7 days after his arrival in July of 1836, performed 8 marriages one day and 6 the next. By this time, the number of women had risen to 106 in comparison to the male population of 154. In 1812, to the early 1820s, the majority of the Indians were kept busy hunting sea otters and meat for the establishment. In 1823 and during the winter of 1824, most of the Aleutians and some of the Russians were cutting timber or material or building vessels. When Russians came to Ross, they had purchased or rented the land around Ross from the village of Matsukming for a period of 12 years with an option of renewing their contract at the end of such a period. And here I would like to insert a note. It seems that the Russians, from the very beginning of their occupation in the New World, were considerably concerned with the proof that they had vested rights in that occupation. This occupation, it was claimed, came from the expedition of Bering in 1741, when 2 rowboats full of armed Russians landed somewhere between 48 and 59 degrees north latitude. Accounts are vague. Some say 48 to 49, others 55, and yet others 58 to 59 north latitude. In 1806, when Rezanov sailed south for much-needed supplies, he had been instructed to explore the Columbian River. He attempted to enter the Columbia River 3 times, but failed because the crew had been severely weakened by scurvy, and only half were able to man the rigging. Kuskoff, on his trip south in 1808, had been given the same instructions. The Nikolai was wrecked and most of the men were either captured or killed by Indians, and Cusco on board the Kodiak, because of strong winds, was not able to make the appointed rendezvous. Could it be that they were looking for Chillicot's site? There have been no reports of bad treatments of the Indians by the Russians. Apparently, during the whole occupation period, there were peaceful relations between the two people. But Russians had a healthy respect for the surrounding mountain Indians between Ross and Bodega and the Indians of the Plains, as the Russians call the Sonoma Valley. As a rule, there were few Indians working for the Russians, although the former were the main labor supply. They were gentle, peaceful, and very capable, especially in the grasping of physical matters. They appeared stupid only because of their laziness and lightheartedness. However, we'd only once observe some work that is not difficult or complicated in order to copy it immediately. Most of the manual labor around Fort Ross was done by the Indians. They were usually employed as day laborers to spade the ground, herd the cattle, and harvest the crops. It is also possible that the Indians worked at felling timber to build the fort, then to build ships, and still later to cut timber for export. Whether the Russians allowed the Indians to go on sea otter hunts is controversial. Some Russian accounts state that the Indians went to the Farallones, but the descendants of the Fort Ross Indians say that none of their own people went on company hunting trips, even to the Farallones. Wages of the Indians usually were paid in board and clothing because they thought little of possessions and still less of money. Gambling was an active pastime with them. The Indians that lived closer to Ross, and sometimes even worked there, have jackets, breeches, blankets, and other things which they regard with complete indifference. When they get such an article, they immediately stake it on a game or exchange it for some trifle. Their only object is getting a thing is to be able to gamble it away again. Their love for it is so great that after a hard day's work at Ross, they will sometimes play till 4 o'clock in the morning and then return to work without sufficient sleep. The Indians were a part of the outside Russian community living around the fort in cone-shaped huts. Soon after the establishment of the fort, the natives were encouraged to marry Aleutians and Creoles. At the most, there were no more than 100 Indians around Fort Ross at any one time, although it had been reported that there were as many as 150 natives at church at one Sunday. The working complement was never above 100. It is very possible that the Indians of Ross learned to speak Russian. Bidwell said they, the Indians of Ross and Bodega, had almost forgotten their own language, and except by the oldest spoke to each other in the Russian language. Maria James, Stewart Point Indian, could still speak Russian as late as 1748. She said that her mother, who had been baptized at the chapel at Ross, taught it to her. Stephen Powers, when he stopped among the Gualalas in 1871, noticed some native corrupt Russian words. What had happened to the participants of Ross after the Russians left? From all indications, the natives were very sorry to see the Russians leave, for the Indians seemed very attached to them and possibly wondered what treatment they would get from the whites. Soon after the Russian occupation, Sandals visited Ross and found him still living there. William Betts, the first mayordomo, then renter, and finally the second owner of Ross, was described as having a large group of well-trained Indians working for him. In 1871, There was still a fragment of the tribe living at Ross, though most of them had moved to Charlie Hop's ranch, some 20 miles northeast of Fort Ross. Mr. Cruz, pioneer ranch owner, said that in 1877, when his father bought the Cruz Ranch 10 miles north of Fort Ross, there had been an Indian settlement back of each ranch in the area between Fort Stewart's Point and Fort Ross. The inhabitants at Cruz Ranch, which had been part of the German rancho, included 20 or 30 Indians up to the early 1890s. Most of them were Fort Ross Indians. The men worked at landings while the women worked in the home. In 1903, at the time of Bartlett's trip up the coast, about half the tribe had moved to an old village site just south of Stewart's Point to work in logging camps. The number always varied according to the amount of work to be done in the forests. There were no Indians left at Ross. In 1840, 8 families, 33 people in all, left Fort Ross for Sitka aboard the Helena. On the 30th of December, 1841, the remainder, 100 men, women, and children, left on board the Constantine. No record to date has been found on these people after they returned. What were their names? Did they go back to their villages? Did they bring any clues of their sojourn in California? We have some indication that they did return to their village on Kenai Peninsula, Tenak, and Kodiak Island. We have some indication that they brought back Pomo wives and Pomo cultural traits. In August of 1895, Father Shashamoth described the following in the then new village of Rainbow. The gambling game of Kapdot is very popular here. During this game, the players sing nonsensical, shamanistic verses. This game was brought here from the Indian tribes in the States. They say that the Russian Stephen Kotelnikov, who married a red-skinned Indian girl, brought it here from California. Occasionally, the alien will gamble away a whole sea otter, which costs $200 at company present prices. To gamble away a gun, a bow and arrow, or clothing is not too unusual. And the mystery, what happened to these people? Or what happened to their descendants? Where are they now? Thank you.